Once upon a time, underneath a hangman's tree, there was a baby. A troop of soldiers, chancing upon the scene, continued on their way, convinced that the only fruits this tree could bear were the corpses they saw dangling in the wind, property of the crows jealously observing the men, protective of their crops, suspicious of this team. Stupefying, the infant is alive. Like Moses in his basket, he seems to be floating on the Red Sea. But unlike the prophet, he wasn't placed there by the loving hand of a desperate mother. Instead, he was deemed unfit to follow her into death, left behind to face an existence that some would say is a hell in itself. He was born out of entrails, and into entrails he was born, leading to his name, Guts, the child that should have never been, raised by a surrogate parent whose life would be extinguished before he reached the age of 10. His first mom hung by a rope, the other claimed by the plague. Gone she is, and with her the semblance of nurturing Guts would have hoped to receive. His new guardians being mercs in armor, the type of tutors that scarcely concern themselves with hugs and reassuring words. The battlefield is no place for a kid, especially one barely out of toddlerhood. And yet this is where his kindergarten would take place, handing out weapons and receiving blows for his clumsiness, at the mercy of Gambino, the man supposed to take care of him. Instead, he would receive an éducation à la Spartiate, having been made to carry a sword before he could even read. When you're raised by mercenaries, it's best to work on your parry instead of increasing your vocabulary, especially when your liege is short-tempered and quick to draw blood. With such a wicked father figure, Guts had tough days ahead of him. But it isn't enough that his daily routine would be made out of punishments and hard work. He also had to endure the rough nights alone, with for only companion the knowledge of his cursed existence. At a young age, Guts developed the habit of falling asleep cradling his sword, a coping mechanism that would greatly shape his future personality, his only friend being the piece of steel that would protect his nights and occupy his days. He would spend most of his waking hours training with it, happy to let physical exhaustion wash away his sorrows, the hurt he felt in his hands a welcome escape from his existential pain. It is also an attempt by the young man to impress his mentor, who, despite his constant mistreatments, was still the only thing standing between him and starvation. More than a psychological need, the urge to earn Gambino's attention also served as a powerful motivator, reinforced by the rare moments of kindness he would show his pupil. It is from this rugged childhood that Guts emerged as a fledgling warrior, still only a preteen, but eager to prove himself. Still, nothing can prepare an innocent soul for the bloodsheds of war, and even one baptized in gore will flinch at the sight of his first kill. Despite the fright, he made it through his battle, as he would many times afterwards, each time earning a small pay that he would bring to Gambino, happy that he was to repay his debt. However, he would soon find out that the price to pay for his father's acceptance isn't one atoned with gold, but in blood. The beast would come in the dead of the night, its lone valid eye fixated on the prey, a young boy he had come to ravish. A man, 200 pounds heavier than Guts. A tiger against a kitten. The sword is too far, for once banished from the bed. There is no protection, no hope. There is only darkness. And in the darkness, a despair. Worse even than the aggression. More disgusting, if possible, than the pig on his back. Gambino sold him out. His father sold him to his rapist. No, it can't be. The pain of the assault, the shock of this transgression matters not in comparison with that. The light of the day does nothing to dissipate the demons of the night. Do stay with you, even in the sun, in your sleep, in your dreams. Always. The demons of trauma. Death underneath that tree would have been preferable. Anything to not have to remember, to not have to face Gambino, to not face the truth. His eyes say he doesn't know anything. Can I talk to him about it? No, he won't believe me. What of this sword? It was to kill him, wasn't it? Or was it to kill myself? Would I have done it if he had admitted everything? I don't know. Fuck! This anger, this shame, it has nowhere to come out. Or does it? I'm afraid. Afraid of who? Of him. The solution is simple. I'm gonna find him, and I'm gonna kill him. This will solve everything. I will avenge myself, and the trauma will go away. That's how it works, right? Then why do I still feel the same? And why did he insist that it was Gambino who sold me out? Surely, he was lying, wasn't he? I can take the pain of my innocence being stolen, but I can't face that scenario. These are the thoughts that would animate Guts as he stood watch over an injured Gambino, trying to figure out if the man he had in front of him could stoop so low as to betray him in that fashion. His verdict? Impossible. Despite being a domineering tyrant, he was also a proud warrior, the type that would never sell a child for a few golden coins. There were also these rare moments of kindness during which Gambino seemed almost father-like. Memories that Guts cherished above all else, allowing him to put his doubts behind him and continue serving the man that he had elected as his replacement father. With him now crippled, he was forced to become the breadwinner, risking his life on the battlefield to bring a little bit of comfort to the one that had done the same in his young age. Far from thanking him for his support, Gambino would often lash out in fits of rage, taking out his resentment on the young man, who wanted nothing more but to make his father proud. The spirit of envy had taken hold of him. He who was once the feared soldier on the battlefield, now reduced to an amputee, forced to witness the exploits of the kid he knows he can no longer beat. Guts, who cannot fathom that he is pouring salt into the wounds of someone who never once saw him as a son, exteriorizes his frustration the only way he knows: by swinging his sword, the one skill that Gambino taught him, and the closest thing to a distress resilience strategy he will ever have. What is he then supposed to do when this vindictive violence is directed his way, wielded by its very teacher? Reminiscent of that night, there is now another adult male invading his tent, but this time, it's a familiar figure, the same person to whom God has dedicated his life. Incoherent in his actions, the man is clearly drunk, and yet his speech makes an awful lot of sense. He accuses him of bringing bad luck, calling him Devil's Child, the fruit of a hangman's tree that should have rotten on the ground. Guts knew that this feeling was widespread amongst the troop, but he always believed Gambino to be an exception. So to hear him say outright that the wood would be a better place if he had died on that day, at the foot of the tree, is the confirmation of his worst fear. Suddenly, his very reason for existing is gone, tearing down the veil of delusion he had blinded himself with for all of these years. Underneath, the atrocious reality. His father, fully aware of the consequences of this act, sold him for 3 measly silver coins. A mercenary of his caliber doesn't need that type of petty change, making the situation somehow worse than it already is. Gambino sold him for close to nothing, and therefore would have sold him for nothing. He doesn't simply undervalue God's life, he's actually been actively trying to get rid of him. He not only blames the loss of his camp wife on his adoptive son, he also pins the entirety of his problems on him. And so, just like Guts, who killed Donovan instead of blaming Gambino, the latter copes the only way he knows how, by hacking the perceived source of his problems to death. The problem here is that the young man he has in front of him isn't the helpless pup that he once was. With the strength to take down army generals, squaring off against a cripple is child's play, even in a state of shock. Without even a second to digest the death of the last parent figure he had left, Guts has to flee. The other mercenaries have seen the body, immediately concluding that the cursed child had struck once again. Motherless, fatherless, and now without a single soul to regard his existence as anything but a nuisance, Guts stares up at the moon. Its immensity reminds him of how small he is, how vast the world is, and how all of it seems to be filled with nothing but suffering. Where to go from there? And why not just die instead? After all, death would be so much easier. Why not let this pack of wolves devour him? It would just take a few seconds, and it'll all finally be over. And yet, his sword finds their necks. Unsure as to why, Guts swings away, fighting for his life with every last bit of energy left in his wounded body. He doesn't know how, he doesn't know why, but he's not going to die today. The wolves thought they were attacking a child. Instead, they were crushed by a beast. A beast that, despite its sharp fangs and ferocious claws, is still very much a child, forever longing for the affection of a father that only existed in his dreams. Gambino's ghost would long haunt Guts, who, despite the abject betrayal, is still holding on to memories of the only man who has ever cared about him. This is the weight of trauma. Time might alleviate it, but it's never fully gone. and any given day can mark its resurgence, bringing back with it the full effect of its crushing embrace. For Guts, the murder of a young page would trigger this reappearance, a deed that the swordsman immediately regretted, having for the first time killed an innocent. Incapable of comprehending his act, he would clutch the dying kid's hand, hoping by this illusory gesture to restore his health. He had come full circle, from molested boy to child murderer. The cycle of hatred is now complete. By killing this youth, it is his past self he ravaged, marking the birth of the beast of darkness, a manifestation of all the violence and hatred contained within him. At the moment, the monster is contained, but for how long? Thus starts the journey of Guts, the Black Swordsman,